And all these divisions that you have.
A sequence?
Is that something?
Historic sequence? Yes, of course. Well, in the Middle East and in Mesopotamia, it was pretty much started with Abraham, and of course worked up through the Jewish patriarchs, and then Moses, then Jesus, then Muhammad. An Orthodox Jewish rabbi told me one time that there were 48 prophets in the Old Testament. So that's a sequence of 48. There were 7 women prophets in the Old Testament.
7 women.
Yes. Okay. Muhammad said there were 124,000 prophets.
Does that include like Native American and
I don't know. He didn't say.
Mayan?
Yeah. 120. Muhammad said there were 124,000 prophets and 33 messengers. So there's a difference between a prophet and a messenger. You know, they both speak the word of God, but I think the messenger is more like a divine lawgiver. So according to Muhammad, one of the early prehistoric, in the sense that they have lost his teachings, prophets was Salah. So that's who you're named after. So. There's a list of the 48 prophets. And 7 female prophets.
Is 7 out of the, or 48 male and then 7 female?
Yes, so 55 or whatever. So, good morning.
Thank you. I'm just a disaster. Just a disaster.
Oh, we just can't take you anyplace, can we?
Get out of place. No. There you there.
Here's some. I've got some. Yeah, you're the only one that's ever done that, so.
Thank you, Joel.
Okay.
Well, I guess that will be a obvious.
Yeah.
Around and doing stuff.
So what is this, the 3rd class in the series?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what thoughts do you have about last week? Anything struck you? Anything?
I think that was really interesting of all the reservations.
The what?
Reservations.
Yes, yeah.
I thought it was very good.
Oh, you didn't know about the other resurrections in the Bible? Yeah. Yeah.
And that there's not another, Jesus is the only one that was resurrected.
Right.
And it's all done. You can just throw it away.
Yeah. Well, that's what Easter celebrates, is Jesus' resurrection. But why do they not celebrate all the other resurrections?
Resurrections. They were raised from the dead, but they were not resurrected.
Okay. So these other people were raised from the dead, but they were not resurrected.
Exactly.
So what is the what is the difference?
Well, the definition for resurrection is the rising of Christ from the dead,
Okay.
the rising again to life of all human dead after the final judgment,
Okay.
the state of one risen from the dead. Risen from the dead.
Okay. So the other words,
I don't believe, that's just my belief.
okay,
I don't believe that they were resurrections.
okay,
And according to my ministers, they were not resurrections. They were
Okay.
people who were raised from the dead, but they didn't go up into heaven and take on a life before, so.
how do you know that? How do you
I
know?
believe it from the Bible.
It doesn't say that in the Bible.
I'm not gonna argue the Bible with you.
Okay, well, I'm just asking, I'm not arguing.
I don't argue my religion.
Okay, okay. No, so
It's just
there's
my
a list
belief
of
that-
people in the Bible who were raised from the dead, but only one was a resurrection.
That's what we believe.
Okay, okay,
And according to, this is according to, Webster. The
Okay.
definition of resurrection.
okay. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, I think that is kind of, when it gets to the specifics of what that is,
A little bit louder.
I think that according to specifics, I think that each sort of division of Christianity takes probably a little different look at that.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of, and not to make fun of anybody's beliefs, but I mean, even in our television shows like Star Trek, you know, it says, "Beam me up, Scotty."
Uh-huh.
They can transfer you from one place to
Right,
another.
right.
So what does that take? I mean, so I think there's this communication that, and thought about communication and transfer that's been going on for a long time. I think it's been-
Well, every culture in the region had an idea of resurrection or afterlife, or, and I've spoken with Methodists before, and I've heard that viewpoint before, so that's kind of a Methodist viewpoint, so,
Oh, you think? Methodist?
yeah? Aren't you Methodist?
Yeah, but I didn't think it was just the Methodists.
That's the only group of people I've ever heard that from.
I've heard Baptists too.
Okay, okay. Well, Methodists and Baptists both arise out of the same culture at the same time, so. Any other thoughts?
Say a word.
Okay.
I'll observe everyone.
Well, as Dr.
Well, I
Seuss,
said, I'm not challenging anybody else's beliefs.
And I'm not challenging you, we've already gone over
well, that's
this last
fine,
week,
and
so
every
we're
believer is
fine.
fine, and I'm
What
actually,
you want to believe, I'll believe what I want to believe.
I'm actually more interested in the conversation as long as it's polite and not confrontational. So, it's obviously a very emotional topic, so that's fine.
Well, religion is an emotional topic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
You know, you have to try to
Reconnect,
not
yeah.
emotional.
The word means to reconnect. Religio. Ligio is like ligaments, to reconnect.
I just want to learn what other people believe as well. And so
That's good.
That's why I'm in here. I'm
Yes,
not
and
in
no
here
one's
not
trying to
change
convert-
anybody.
No one's trying to convert anybody else to anything else, so just maybe broaden your horizons a little bit. The word resurrection in the Bible is anastasis. Ana means to rise or to get up again. Stasis is a firm, fixed foundation. So when you're dead, you're a firm, fixed foundation. When you get up, that's... some of the other resurrections in the Bible occurred hundreds of years after the person died. And there were certainly, good morning, viewpoints within Judaism that taught that resurrection was physical. In fact, one group believes that there is a bone in your lower back called a luz that is never decays, never declines, and it is from that bone that your body will be reconstructed. Okay, well, today I was going to talk about Native American religions. So there According to Muhammad, were 124,000 prophets, 33 messengers. According to Orthodox Judaism, there were 48 male prophets in the Old Testament, 7 female prophets. Of course, in 2012, there was talk about the Mayan calendar ending, which is obviously an indication that the world was going to end. The world did not physically end in 2012, so they had to kind of rethink some of their ideas. I wonder if there's some way I can zoom that to make it smaller. I don't think so. So this is a t-shirt I got in 2012. By the way, there are Christian groups who teach that the world is ending, the world is going to end, the world's going to end soon, we're in the last days. That is not biblical. There's nothing in the Bible, in the New Testament, about the world ending. Okay.
What's the thing about the rapture?
Okay. Well, the rapture was from the Apostle Paul, and I spoke about it last week, 1 Thessalonians 4. So what Paul says is that I want you to understand what happens when you die. And his explanation is Jesus himself comes down, takes you back to heaven. That's the rapture passage. People today think that it's speaking literally and that it's about a second coming, but the New Testament doesn't even mention the term second coming. So, Jesus said, I will come again, but each one of the prophets promised to return. So each of the founders of the world's religions, Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Moses says he's going to send someone like himself, Jesus, Muhammad, there are messianic prophecies within Islam, and Native American. Native Americans promised that their prophets would return. So, and that's what we'll be talking about. So in 2012, I was in Mexico, and this is a different T-shirt they have now that they're saying now that instead of the end of the world, maybe it's just the birth of a new age, a new era. So the Mayan calendar is cyclical. So when one cycle ends, so when okay, so when one cycle ends, another begins. And even in the Bible, there are timetables. So when it talks about the end of days or the end of whatever, it's talking about the timetable, not the end of the world. So the book of Revelation, a lot of people think that that talks about the end of the world. If you read the last couple chapters, it talks about all things being made new. So the world is going to be recreated, not destroyed, is even what the Bible teaches. So this is in Guatemala. This is a Mayan Indian site. It's Tikal is the name of the site. These are photographs that I took. I've been to Tikal, Guatemala, I think 3 times for a total of 5 days. The Mayan Indians, their average height was maybe 4'8". They had no metal tools, no beasts of burden, and they built mountains of stone. They were geniuses in agriculture, in healing, in timekeeping. And you notice the buildings, everything is angled. So even though there's no mortar between the stones, we're looking at 1,500 to 2,000 years that these have been standing there. And when Europeans discovered these, they were all totally overgrown and encrusted with trees. And so in the left picture there, the hill behind the stela, the stone, is an unexcavated pyramid. And then these stones are lying every which way, and they're covered with hieroglyphics and carvings and stories. The one on the right is Temple 2 at Tikal. There are 5 huge temples at Tikal, and Tikal was formerly a city of 100,000 people, and it was the powerhouse in the region. And actually, Tikal was actually conquered by Caracal in Belize. So the Mayan cities would vie with each other. Temple 1 on the left is the temple of the giant jaguar. It has 9 levels. So the Mayans believe that there are 9 heavens. Some of the most famous architecture in the world. Oh, there's the same one. That's Temple 2. That's me about 25 years ago. Again, these things just in the jungle, covered with hieroglyphics. Top left is an unexcavated pyramid again. And this is a huge site. You could spend an entire day walking around and not see all of it. So we're going to talk about the Mayans a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good question. On the pyramids, why were the pyramids built? Were they burial grounds? Or
I think, didn't the politician say recently they're to store grain? No. No. Who is it? Who's the guy that was a surgeon? That's now the Secretary of Housing? Yeah. He said that they're just to store grain.
They're aligned with the stars too, aren't they?
Yes, they are aligned with the stars. The roof cones, the structures on the very top, they're called roof cones, have slits in them. And the priest can sit down on a certain spot on certain times of the year, and Venus will line up through this slit, and Saturn will line up through this one, and the planets will line up through the slits. The night sky there is so brilliant. There's no light pollution. So the sky is literally is so brilliant, so beautiful. So they could, the temples and the pyramids are situated to predict the beginning of spring. You know, mid-year, the end of the growing cycles. Another thing that's fascinating is you can stand on top of the pyramids, the temples, and the acoustics are just amazing. You can stand on top and you can whisper, and the people on the ground can hear you. And I don't know how they did that or how that works, but I remember in the upper right picture, the one on the lower left, that's Temple 2. I got up before dawn and went out to the temples to watch the sunrise over the temples. And I was sitting there, and it sounded like huge suction cup sounds. And I was looking around like, what is that? And I looked down, and there were people climbing up the stairs, and they were wearing tennis shoes. And just the footsteps on the stairs was amplified so much, it was like, I'm looking around like, what is that? The acoustics are amazing, and the Mayans will tell you that they actually planted crystals in the ground to focus the energy. This is a place of pilgrimage. Very.
Well, do we know who the founder of the Mayan religion?
Mayan.
Or,
I'll get to that
Okay.
a little bit. Of course, the answer is no. But so this is North America, and this is the original.
You'd have to turn off the light.
It doesn't turn this one off.
Oh, okay.
But does it turn off these others?
Yeah, you wanted that? So this is where the various tribes lived. It doesn't help much. And I looked for another switch, and
No, they always have one that stays on.
okay, is that any better, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we were talking before the class started. Each one of these tribes has their own language, their own culture, to a certain extent their own variations on the theme of religion. that is something that just fascinates me, that how can people who live right next to each other have their own language? And it's pretty much the same all over the world, that one tribe lives next to another tribe, and yet they speak a different language. So in Europe, you've got French, you've got German, you've got Portuguese, you've got Spanish, you've got variations on the theme of all these. English, Polish, Russian, you know, how does that happen? Are they so isolated for so long that they don't even communicate enough to even, anyway, it's just one of my interests. So these are the nations, the tribes of Mexico. And this is the Yucatan. Whoops. Take it back again. Well, Belize is, you can see Belize there. It's on the Caribbean, just south of the Yucatan. So Tikal is right, or Belize is here, Tikal is here, Caracal. Caracal conquered Belize, or conquered Tikal at one time. I've been to all these places. So, I guess I could, west. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. In 14...
China, wasn't it?
India.
India.
Okay, they're looking for India. But in 1492, Columbus sailed west. In 1453, which is only 30, 40 years earlier, the Muslims had conquered Constantinople, or Istanbul, and cut off the trade routes. So the people in Europe wanted the spices, and they couldn't go east. So then they thought, well, let's try sailing the other way. They knew that the world was round. They just didn't know that there was a continent in between. So the Europeans showed up here, and they decided that the native cultures were primitive and barbaric. But in today, a much richer picture is emerging that so what they found was huge cities with urban populations, well-versed in the arts and sciences, following a finely ordered system of law. And so, of course, the Europeans decided that they had to destroy this. And it's only fairly recently that native peoples are now stepping forward and revealing traditions and sacred knowledge that they took underground for 500 years. And they're doing this because they understand the importance of this day. And what is happening in the world today has actually been foretold in the Native American religions and in their prophecies.
Is there any relationship between that and other cultures that were in South America?
Of course, yes.
There is a relationship.
It was all interconnected, all interrelated. There was trade, there was... I was telling Doc before the class, a friend of mine who is Lakota Indian, one of the powerhouse cities of Mexico is called Teotihuacan. Huge city of huge pyramids and sculpture and art. And my Lakota friend told me that in the Lakota language, Teotihuacan is the teepee of Wakan. And Wakan is the Lakota name for God. So Teotihuacan in Mexico, in Lakota language, is the teepee of God. And he said the whole Mississippi River Valley civilization was all interconnected, all interrelated. There was trade, there was communication. It happened in the Dakotas. The elders, the Indian elders, say that we are now living in a time of purification and can expect to witness chaos and destruction in all the kingdoms of nature. But this is a time for a reuniting of the races. Barriers of religion and nationality will begin to fall as people realize their essential unity. They say that we must heal the damage done to Mother Earth, the source of life, and must recognize that all living things are endowed with spirit. In the coming times, we will see the return of one or more great teachers who will guide us into the future. Part of this viewpoint is the Native Americans protesting the building of the oil pipeline in North Dakota. They want to stop this because oil pipelines poison water. And just for their own health and well-being, they don't want to turn Indian land into Detroit, so the water is undrinkable.
Excuse me, who wrote that?
Who wrote that?
And when? I mean, it must
Well,
be
this is just a
within-
general overview of Native American ideas, but
Was it
it's,
written thousands of years ago? Was it written?
yes, I'll get to that, yeah, what they said.
You just said that somebody said it, that we're in the time of change, it said.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's what the presentation is, so I'll get to it.
That was back,
We don't know how long ago, but a long time ago, at least 1,000 years.
yeah, I mean, it couldn't be specific to the paper.
Yeah. So in his book, Return of the Bahana, he talks about the widely held belief among Native peoples of the imminent return of the Savior figure, and claims that in no way differs from the Christian belief in the second coming. So Bahana is Hopi Indians. And the Hopians are the guardians of, they're the guardians of the Indian culture. So in the legendary history of many tribes, there is a story of a teacher similar to Jesus who taught the spiritual mysteries and an ethical way of life. When he left, they say he promised to return at a time when the earth would be in great turmoil to guide humanity to the future. He is best known by the names of Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan. Quetzalcoatl is Aztec, Kukulkan is Mayan. So it's the same person, different name, in two different cultures. This particular stone carving is located in the British Museum. I've been there, I've seen it. The British Museum has some of the greatest Mayan artifacts. So Hopi prophecies speak of the return of Bahana, their true right brother, who left them in ancient times, promising to return. They wear their hair in bangs to form a window, they say, by which their elder brother, when he returns, can recognize them. It is also an identifying mark for the elder brother to recognize them. So I'm going to talk about a little bit more about this. I've actually got a video to show, goes into a lot more detail. So Lakota leaders, Black Elk and Crazy Horse, in the late 1800s, lived at a time that saw the U.S. decimation of many native groups, and both Black Elk and Crazy Horse had a vision of the future. That's actually a picture of Black Elk. Saw that his people would be plagued by famine and sickness and war. They would lose heart, and the sacred hoop of his nation would be broken. But he saw a vision of his own nation being reunited after 7 generations and becoming part of the greater hoop of the nations of the earth. These people were viewed as savages, and this is what they taught. That's also Black Elk. Then he saw the daybreak star rising in the east and heard a voice that said, "It shall be a relative to them, and who shall see it shall see much more. For from them comes wisdom, and those who do not see it shall be dark." Black Elk thought this meant that a great prophet from the east would bring a message to his people. Crazy Horse's vision foretold the darkness that descended on his people, and he saw the coming of automobiles and airplanes and the tragic world wars of the modern era. I've got a video to show that explains this in a lot more detail. He saw his people gradually awakening after the last war and beginning to dance again under the sacred tree. Amazingly, he saw that dancing along with his people were representatives of all races who had become brothers. Thus he foresaw that the world would be made whole again, not just by his own nation, but by all peoples working together. Upper left is the sacred hoop. It talks about the 4 nations, the 4 races of people, the black, white, yellow, and red. Each one of these groups of people has a guardianship, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that. So Daganoweda, that's actually a picture of Daganoweda, unified the tribes of the Iroquois Confederacy, and he said the peacemaker foresaw the turmoil and destruction that would destroy the lives and culture of the Confederacy tribes, but he also saw a time beyond when there would come a great prophet who would be a world uniter. He would come in the same spirit as other prophets before him, but would renew the spirit of man in a way much more worldwide and all-embracing than ever before in history. In Peru, there's the Inca and Machu Picchu. Incan prophecies predicted that the white man's coming would bring 500 years of materialism and imbalance, but now they say that that era is coming to an end, and a new age will signal the return of light to the planet and the dawn of a golden era. So each one of the religions, Indian religions, was different. Each one was a variation on the same theme, but this is their vision of the future. This is their vision of actually where we are right now. So we live in a time of the fulfillment of prophecy. Now he tours the world teaching his simple message. Humanity should cure itself and give help to the poor. Regenerate yourself with light and then help those who have poverty of the soul. Return to the inner spirit which we have abandoned while looking elsewhere for happiness. So Quetzalcoatl, the image there, the name Quetzalcoatl means feathered serpent or feathered snake. So the image is of a feathered snake man. He's described as a white man with a beard who wore long robes, who gave a message of love, forbidding the blood sacrifice, teaching the one supreme God, and giving the Toltecs many material things of their culture, such as the calendar. He left the Toltecs because of the enmity and persecution of a powerful religious leader, but he promised one day to return, as he had left from the east over the ocean. So when the Europeans showed up in South America, Central America, they welcomed the Europeans because they thought that this is the fulfillment of their prophecy. Quetzalcoatl has been described as perhaps the most remarkable figure in ancient American history. He established not only a religion, but taught the people all manner of arts, sciences, and useful social customs. Not all histories can agree when Quetzalcoatl lived, or even if he ever lived, though most tend to agree that he did exist. Some say that Quetzalcoatl lived in the 12th century, others that he lived at the same time as Jesus. Many historians agree that Quetzalcoatl established the Toltec calendar, the Toltec era, on August 6, 1168 AD. And most Mexican year counts begin with that date. So the idea of the end of the calendar and the end of the world has its origin in 1168. So this goes back 900 years. A Toltec era was 52 years long. I think it's based on the orbit of Venus. They tracked Venus. Calendar dates are based on cycles of 52 years. The Toltec and Aztec years were of the same length as our years, while those of the Mayans, as explained later, were shorter than our years by 5 days. The temples, I showed the picture of the temples in Tikal, the huge stone temples. They would build the temples for 52 years, and then they would stop. And it has to do with the Mayan time cycles. So a couple of scholars tell us that most myths agree that Quetzalcoatl not only said that he would return from the east, but before he returned, bearded white men would come who would conquer the Indians and enforce on them a different religion. However, he said that when he returned in all the ancient glory of the Indians would return. So one of the books cited is Warriors of the Rainbow by Willoya and Brown. And they say that the return by no means necessarily means the return of the same physical being, but can mean far more logically the return of the same spiritual message coming from another great prophet. So what about the return of Quetzalcoatl? Various writings say he spoke of a new religion coming in the 13th era, the 13th Katun, the 13th 52-year cycle. He would return bringing a reign of peace and the advent of a new spiritual order. He would return as he left from the east across the sea. He would be bearded, Caucasian, and wear long robes. He said he would come in the year of his birth, but the only date that we have of the birth of his birth is the birth of the Toltec era, described as 1168 AD. So the return of the 13th Toltec era, as foretold in the prophecies, would not be earlier than AD 1844. So these are the 13 Toltec eras, and the years indicate so the Mayans had a calendar with cycles of 260 years, since the years were only 360 days long. By the way, the biblical year is 360 days, so they agree. One of their cycles is approximately equal to 256 of our years. They called a year a tun, and 20 years made a katun. A katun was named after the last day in which it would, the last day in it, which would be a day ahau preceded by a number. A particular katun, like katun 5 ahau, would thus recur every 256 years. That particular temple is in Belize. They have, go back a page. You can see the stucco reliefs on the side of the temple. And the stucco reliefs have been there for 1,500 years. Astonishing. This is Shanantanich is the name of this place. I've been there 2 or 3 times. So there appeared among the Mayans a famous seer or prophet by the name of Chilam Balam. Chilam Balam, the name means jaguar priest, who foretold the coming of the white men and even gave details of the diseases and war they would bring, and gave the dates of the great disasters that actually some came true according to his calculations in the Mayan calendar. It is the translations of his book of prophecies, called the Book of the Jaguar Priest, made by Spanish-educated Mayan Indians into Latin script, but the Mayan language that we see today, I just butchered that. Anyway, the oldest and apparently most authentic of these translations is called the Book of Chilam Balam. It is quite evident that Chilam Balam was not only warning the Indians of the bad things they would suffer under white rule, but also giving them hope that one day their ancient glory would come back, when a new religion would come that would bring all the world into harmony. This is actually foretold in all the world's religions. So the coming of this great spiritual being, probably thought of as the return of Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl, was given great emphasis by Chilam Balam. The Katun 5 Ahau next arrived in 1584, according to the book on September 30th. The book speaks of the Indians being oppressed by white people after 1594, so the coming of the next great prophet must be considered to occur at the next turn of the Katun wheel, which would mean another 256 years, or beginning in 1844 AD. So the 12th tune would appear in part both 1862 and 1863, which would be the date of the coming of a great prophet of benign holiness. To this prophecy, Chilam Balam gives another sign by which the coming of the one or more who will unite the world shall be known. The book of Chilam Balam also refers to 2 bearded ones from the east. One goes forth as ambassador, another awakens Itzamna Ka'ul, the God of the heavens, in the west. Also on the same page it says that the temple receives its guests, the bearded ones from the lands of the sun, from the east. They are bringings of a sign from our Father God, blessings in abundance. So there will apparently be at least two important lords who manifest themselves at this time. One as an ambassador, preparing the way, the other appearing as the one who gives the world-uniting message. It speaks further of the sign, the blessings in abundance. And the quote, yes, this is the sign of your assurance that they shall come from heaven. These sacramental objects of yours, O Itza, O people, these holy things of yours derived from Kukulkan. Find your holiness and truth and penitence. Find holiness with the people of God. Then the rest of the manuscript is obliterated. This is another quote, a little bit long, but what it ends is, I say, the divisions of the earth shall be one. So I think you can kind of start to get the idea of what they were saying and what they were predicting. Anybody have any comments on that?
We
Or?
went back to that last week, because we went through that kind of fast.
Okay. So in the world, the one supreme God, he comes to you from heaven in the drops of rain. It is good what I say unto you assembled here, O people. Let the earth awaken when they tread upon it and attend. And another cartoon later on. Sufficient unto themselves are my words, for I am Chilam Balam, the jaguar priest. I repeat my words of divine truth. So this is a theme that is mirrored in the Bible and in all the world's religions. That if you read the book of Isaiah, and if you skip to the end of the book, it says that this will be a time when all people will be brought together to worship before God. This is what the Mayans taught. This is what the Incas taught. All the people of Central and South America. Any other thoughts about? Go ahead. Yes.
Who was Hiawatha? One he,
The she,
she,
Hiawatha.
the she.
Okay. Who is Hiawatha?
I mean, we have literature about that.
Let her stick to what she said.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
fine.
That's okay. I mean, she led people across the country. Was she married to a white guy?
I thought she was a follower of Quetzalcoatl.
I think Hiawatha is Northern America.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
I don't know how I wanted to show you a couple of videos. I guess okay. This is the first segment I showed you. I guess I stopped too early, but so this is in Tikal, in Guatemala. I just thought this was just kind of, it's amazing to see the wildlife there. So the trees are full of spider monkeys. This is a spider monkey, and he's way up in a tree, reaching into the tree, drinking. This is in Tikal, right next to the huge temple number 1, the temple of the giant jaguar. There's a ball court down below, and the tree was just full of toucans. And toucans actually fly like this because they're top heavy. But as I mentioned, I got up before dawn, went to the temples, watched the sunrise over the temples, and the jungle wakes up in layers. So one species of bird will wake up and start singing. The monkeys will wake up and start their song. Parrots actually have a song. And so it's like squawk, 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 squawk. And they tumble down 4 or 5 branches and they fly back up and they do it again. Squawk, 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 squawk. So I'm sitting on this temple in the middle of, on the top of a Mayan temple and watching the jungle wake up around me. And it was pretty astonishing. That's the toucan. Interesting that his beak looks like teeth. Obviously, he's a bird and not particularly fierce, but on the right is also Tikal. That's temple number 5. The roof combs are hollow, so you can go inside there and you can look up and see the hollow inside the. So this is inside. This is temple 3 in the upper right. And this is laying on my back looking directly up at the carved wooden lintels up above. And you can see, I think this is right here, but the carved designs, this is a hand holding a 3-bladed knife. And the person in the picture is Chilam Balam, the jaguar priest. The whole picture is a priest holding a 3-bladed knife with a jaguar cloak and 2 retainers holding his cloak at the corners. It's astonishing to see these things in person. This particular temple, almost no one climbs because it's very difficult to get up there, and so of course I had to do it. But in the very first Star Wars movie, at the very end, they've won the battle. And at the scene where the robots are all polished up and there's an award ceremony, the beginning of that scene is spaceships landing in a jungle around temples. And this is where it was. They sent a film crew to Tikal, filmed about 2 seconds worth. And
if there was communication between one area and another, was it always done by messenger, or you say you had carvings on wood? Did they have a paper-like transfer of information?
Yes. They had libraries full of paper books, codices. And one thing the Spanish felt obligated to do was to destroy their libraries. So today there are only about 4 codices still existing. They destroyed their entire history. Bottom right is a figure, I think that's Chak, the rain god. He's wearing a jaguar mantle, so you can kind of see the eyes of the jaguar. So this is the hat, this is the eyes of the jaguar, this nose, mouth. This is probably about 12 feet tall. This is at the Mayan site, Lamani in Belize. I'm going to talk about the codices, what they actually say. This is another place in Belize called, it's the ATM cave, the Aktun Tunichel Muktal cave, and it is a Mayan burial site. So it's a very difficult climb to get up inside here. You actually have to climb a metal ladder to get up another 20 feet. But this is where they buried their dead, in Xibalba, which is to Mayans is the underworld. And these skeletons have been there so long that the water dripping down has actually calcified them and stuck them to the floor. So one of the things that they would do, you can see the pottery there. Pot, stick it up, turn it upside down, put some incense underneath, knock a hole in the pot, and the smoke escaping from the pot symbolized the release of the spirit from the body. So again, amazing to be there and see this, and to even be allowed to go into a place like that. And of course, to remove the skeletons, they would have to destroy them, so they're not removing them. I think the one on the right is a teenage girl who was. But it's a huge cavern, it's a huge cave. The Mayans had a tradition of 9 heavens and a number of underground realms. So 9 and 13, I think. Let's see if this works. This is a video that I shot. I got to stay in the homes with Mayan Indians. So this is Grandma. and she's making tortillas. Traditional Mayans have a cooking hut and a sleeping hut. So this is a cooking hut. But you can see the features. You know, they look very, very Mayan. Among themselves, they still only speak Mayan. There are some people that are very proud of the fact that their children only speak Mayan, no English. Look at the ceiling, the crystallized soot on the ceiling. So she's been cooking there for years and years and years, and the soot is crystallized on the thatch. So this is one of the families I got to stay with. That's my wife and I with some monkeys. Like I said, the wildlife there is amazing. In Mexico, of course, there are Mayan cities right on the ocean in Mexico. We were there in 2013. One thing I wanted to do is to just record a conversation done entirely in Mayan. So that's what this is. So this is a Mayan elder up in the mountains of Belize.
He's not an elder.
No. He is now. This is probably 1999, 98, 99. So that's Marcelio there. I still see him on Facebook occasionally. I've got friends that still live there, and I still see pictures. The features look like they just came off of a stone carving. Just slightly forehead, large nose.
Baixo casi bahala. Não me gusta. Quase que buscan o outro reino de Deus. Buscan todo também, também leite transformar, transformar durante tempo. Hacer que leite, mira lá, Deus é leite. E não que leite, sabe tu, leite mandamento, toco. Então,
So people ask sometimes what happened to the Mayans. They are still very much there. They're desperately trying to hold on to their culture, retain their language, to varying degrees of success. But
Well, do they have a Mayan school for the children, or do they, how does that work?
when I was in Tulum, in Mexico, the guide, a young woman, said that at home, unless she speaks Mayan, her grandparents and parents won't even talk to her. So, yeah, it's, I don't know if they have schools. They probably do. I was talking before the class that my friend in South Dakota, East Lakota, and he and his mother started what they call Lakota universities to teach the people the Lakota language and the culture and the history. So there are people who are striving to maintain their cultures and to keep these things intact. Yeah.
I have a friend, she's not here, British Columbia.
A little bit louder.
I have a friend in British Columbia,
Yeah.
and her son has recently married this girl whose mother is a professor, PhD. She is, they call them First Nation up here.
Yes.
And she, in her biggest goal in life is to ensure that the Native American language stays alive.
Yes, of course.
I relate that to being from Scotland and people trying to keep Gaelic alive.
Yes.
What a waste of time. It's going to die out. You know, I mean, pursue efforts in other directions. You can't keep the languages alive.
Well-
It's never going to happen. You speak Gaelic in Scotland, you know, you speak English.
Well, it's like this class. Each person has their own culture. Not one is really any more important than another. There's a dominant culture that kind of the umbrella that covers us all, but it's important to preserve the cultures of all the cultures, if nothing else, just for history. You know,
The Americans are a different culture from Scottish culture.
yes, of course.
Yeah, so I have to.
But there are things that we have in common, and that's pretty much the name of the game, is to broaden your horizons enough to respect other people's viewpoints.
Sure,
retain
I'm
your
talking-
own.
I'm talking about their language.
Yeah,
To go to all that trouble. And apparently she's very fervent, this lady's a professor at British Columbia University. She's very fervent about what she does.
yeah.
I visited the Cherokee Nation up in Cherokee, not so far from here. And they started teaching their children the Cherokee language in their grammar schools. And he said that it had become so well adapted that when he would walk down the street in Cherokee, that the teenagers would be speaking in the Cherokee language as opposed to the native.
Yeah.
So they were resurrecting their language through their children, through their school.
Yes. It's important to retain the culture, yeah.
I think that there's a feeling that even though, like when Lakota would come out and do off the reservation.
So Doc is from North Dakota, so he's got,
That if there was something that went wrong and people were coming back to be the bigger family, that the old stories would take like all the male children back to where things happened, and they would have their smoke huts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that history, and I think this is basic to their religion,
yeah,
is that the stories told by their old leaders, their wise men, so to speak, was what was the drawing thing.
Yep.
If you came through as a child, and that was how the basic stories about life and whatever, that had incredible drawing power to, people, even if they'd been away for 12, 14 years, let's say,
Yeah.
or whatever.
that's one of the disconnects between the Native American children and the white society, is they don't want to be white. They don't want to be assimilated. A friend of mine is the pipe bearer of the Ojibwe Nation in Wisconsin, the Lac de Flambeau Band, and he said that there they have classes where they teach the kids the language. They still speak the Ojibwe language among themselves. They teach the kids the language, they teach the history, they teach the culture, they teach respect, they teach all of these things. And he told me that in the regular school, the kids will go to school and they'll goof off and they won't pay attention and all this stuff. But in Indian classes, there's none of that. They sit there, they pay attention, they listen, they participate, and they want to learn that. So there are movements among the various tribes to retain their culture. So you mentioned that just north of here is the Cherokee, and it just so happens I've got a video here of a guy who's a Cherokee. So this is about, I guess it's 14 minutes long, but it's fascinating. It's one of the most fascinating videos I've ever seen. And originally it was about an hour long, and I cut it down to about 14 minutes. But so this guy is Cherokee. He's on Facebook. He's a Facebook friend of mine. But
And as I began to travel around with the drum and learn, I learned that many people have many prophecies about this time. I began to hear these over and over. And so I kind of more or less memorized a lot of them.
it's an old
And what I'd
video.
like to do now is share with you some of those. See, at the beginning of each cycle of time, the Great Spirit comes down through a messenger and makes a strong appearance upon the earth. And we are coming to an end of a cycle now. It's not the first cycle. There was a cycle of spirit. There was a cycle of the mineral, the rock. There was a cycle of the plant. And now we're in the cycle of the animal, coming to the end of that and beginning the cycle of the human being. When we get into the cycle of the human being, the highest and greatest powers that we have will be released to us and be released from that light or soul that we carry to the mind. But right now we're coming to the end of the animal cycle when we have investigated ourselves and learned what it is to be like an animal on this earth. At the beginning of this cycle of time, long ago the Great Spirit came down and he made an appearance. He gathered the peoples of the earth together, they say, on an island that is now beneath the water. And he said to the human beings, he said, I'm going to send you to, and over time I'm going to change you to 4 colors. But I'm going to give you some teachings, and you will call these the original teachings. And when you come back together with each other, you will share these, so that you can live and have peace on earth, and a great civilization will come about. And he said, during this cycle of time, I'm going to give each of you 2 stone tablets. And he said, when I give you those stone tablets, don't cast them upon the ground. Because if any of the brothers and sisters of the 4 directions and the 4 colors cast their stone tablets on the ground, not only will human beings have a hard time, but almost the earth itself will die. And so he gave us each a responsibility, and we call that the guardianship. And to the Indian people, the red people, he gave the guardianship of the earth. And we were to learn during this cycle of time the teachings of the earth, and the plants that grow from the earth, and the foods that you can eat, and the herbs that are healing. So that when we came back together with the other brothers and sisters, we could share this knowledge with them. Because something good was to happen on the earth. And to the south, we gave the yellow race of people the guardianship of the wind. And they were to learn about the sky and breathing, and how to take that within ourselves for spiritual advancement. And we were to share that with us in this time. And to the west, there was blackness of night. He gave the black race of people the guardianship of the water. And they were to learn the teachings of the water, which is the chief of the elements. It is the most humble and also the most powerful. When I went to the University of Washington and learned that it was a black man that invented blood fasting, it didn't surprise me because blood is water. And the elders already told me that black people will bring the teachings of water to humanity. And to the north, where there's white snow on this continent, he gave the white race of people the guardianship of the fire. And if you look at the center of many of the things they do, you will find the fire in this light bulb. They say that is the white man's fire. If you look at the center of a car, you will find a spark. If you look at the center of the airplane, the train, you will find the fire. And the fire moves, also consumes. This is why it was the white brothers and sisters that began to move upon the face of the earth and reunite us as a human family. Because they had the guardianship of the fire, this was their responsibility. And so a long time passed, and the Great Spirit gave each of the 4 races 2 stone tablets. Ours are kept at the Hopi Reservation in Arizona, at 4 Corners area, on 3rd Mesa. And we were given a sacred handshake to show when we came back together as brothers and sisters that we remembered the teachings. And it was indicated on the stone tablets that the Hopis had that the first brothers and sisters that would come back to learn would come as turtles across the land. They would be human beings, but they would come as turtles. So when the time came close, the Hopis built a special village to welcome the turtles that would come across the land, and they got up in the morning and looked out at sunrise, and they looked out across the desert and they saw the Spanish conquistadors coming covered in armor like turtles across the land. So this was them. So they went out to the Spanish man and they extended their hand, hoping for the handshake, and into the hand the Spanish man dropped the trinket. And so word spread throughout North America that it was going to be a hard time. But maybe some of the brothers and sisters had forgot the sacredness of all things, and all the human beings were going to suffer for this on the earth. People came on the East Coast, and they went across this land to the east, and we were told in the prophecies that we should try to remind all the people that would come here of the sacredness of all things. And if we could do that, there would be peace on earth. But if we did not do that, when the roads went clear from east to west, and when the other races or colors of the earth had walked clear across this land, if by that time we had not come together as a human family, the Great Spirit would grab the earth with his hand and shake it. When they got to the west coast of this land, they said they would then begin to build a black ribbon, and on this black ribbon they would move a bug. And when you begin to see this bug moving on the land, that was a sign for the first shaking of the earth. And this first shaking of the earth would be so violent that this bug would be shaken off the earth into the air, and it would begin to move and fly in the air. And by the end of this shaking, this bug would be in the air around the world. And behind it would be a trail of dirt. And eventually, the whole sky of the entire earth would become dirty from these trails of dirt. And this would cause many diseases that would get more and more complicated. So the bug moving on the land, of course, is easy to see now. In 1908, the Model T Ford was mass-produced for the first time. So they always knew the first shaking of the earth was about to come about. That's the First World War. In the First World War, the airplane came into wide usage for the first time. That was the bug moving into the sky. And so then they knew that something very important would happen. There would be an attempt to make peace on earth on the west coast of this land. And so the elders began to watch for this. And they began to hear that there was going to be a League of Nations in San Francisco. So the elders gathered in Arizona around 1920 or so, and they wrote a letter to Woodrow Wilson, and they asked if Indian people could be included in the League of Nations. At that time, the United States Supreme Court had held that a reservation is a separate and semi-sovereign nation, not a part of the United States, but protected by it. And this was a concern because people didn't want the reservations to become more and more separate. They didn't want them to be considered nations. So they did not write back, and the Navy people were left out of the League of Nations. So that circle was incomplete. In the League of Nations circle, there was the southern door of the yellow people. There was the western door of the black people. There was the northern door of the white people. But the eastern door was not attended. And the elders knew that peace will not come on earth until the circle of humanity is complete. Until all the four colors sit in the circle and share their teachings, then peace will come on earth. So they knew things would happen. Things would speed up a little bit. There would be a Cobb built around the earth, and people would talk across this Cobb. When this talking Cobb, the telephone was built around the earth. A sign of life would appear in the east, but it would tilt and bring death. It would come with the sun. But the sun itself would rise one day, not in the east, but in the west. So the elders said, when you see the sun rising in the west, and you see the sign of life reversed and tilted in the east, you know that the great death is to come upon the earth. And now the great spirit will grab the earth again with his hand and shake it. And this shaking will be worse than the first. So the sign of life reversed and tilted. They called that the swastika. And the sun rising in the west was the rising sun of Japan. These two symbols are carved in stone in Arizona. When the elders seen these two flags, these were the signs that the earth was to be shaken again. And the worst misuse of the guardianship of fire is called the gourd of ashes. They said the gourd of ashes will fall from the air. So it will make the people like blades of grass in a prairie fire. And things will not grow for many seasons. I saw on TV not too long ago, they were talking about the atomic bomb and gourd of ashes. They said it was the best kept secret in the history of the United States. The elders wanted to speak about it in 1920 at the League of Nations. They would have spoken of it and foretold its coming if they could have entered into the League of Nations. So they knew that after the second shaking of the earth, and they saw the gourd of ashes fall from the sky, they knew then they would be trying to make peace on the other side of this land. And because the peace attempt on the west coast had failed, they would build a special house on the east coast of this Turtle Island, North America. And all the nations and the peoples would come to this house, and it would be called the House of Micah. It would shine like the mica on the desert shines. So the elders began to see they were building the United Nations made out of glass that reflects like the mica on the desert. So they knew that this is the House of Micah, and all the peoples of the earth should go to it. So they met and talked about this. They said that in 1920s they had written and they had not been responded to, so this time they said, we better go to the front door of the house of Micah, because things might get a lot worse. So elders representing a number of tribes, I believe, drove to New York City. When the United Nations opened, they went to the front door of the house of Micah, and they said these words, we represent the indigenous people of North America, and we wish to address the nations of the earth. And they said they're going to give you 4 days to consider whether or not we will be allowed to speak. And they retreated to one of the 6 nations reserves in New York State. The 6 nations reserves are the keepers of the great law of peace of the prophet that appeared here in North America, the Leader. And this great law of peace is still recited. It takes 4 days between sunrise and noon each year in Indian by memory. It's recited about this time of year. 4 days later, they came back, and I believe the nations of the earth, they heard that the Indians had come to the door, and they voted to let the Indians in. They wanted to hear what they had to say. But the United States is one of 5 nations, and the United Nations with a veto power, and still they were concerned because this time the native sovereignty was even stronger. And I believe they vetoed the interests of the native people. So then they knew other things would happen on the earth, and that the United Nations would not bring peace on earth, but there would be continuing and deepening confusion, and that the little wars would get worse. But during that time now, we're between the first light of the day and the sunrise. The sunrise is about to come. When it comes up, everyone's going to see it. But you know how it is in the village. There's a few people that get up early, and there's some that sleep till noon. I'm probably one of those that sleeps till noon. The hoping and the prophecy say there will be a religion that comes there. Maybe it will be true and bring unity, or maybe it will not bring unity. If it does not bring unity, a second religion will come. And the people of this religion are known in the Hopi language as the Bahani, the people of Baha. Meaning means people of. Baha means light or glory. Baha means followers of light, or the people of Baha. We've been waiting for these people a long time. They say they will bring a teaching that will unite the earth. So, in closing, I would like to call on each and every person, regardless of who you are, young or old, maybe denominated, to arise now and to awake, to embrace this time, to learn everything you can about the teachings and the writings, to arise and awake and go forth on the peoples of the earth. You're going to find them. Peoples everywhere are more receptive to the message. It's time to arise and awake, go forth and teach, rock the world. We call it the good road, the road that runs north to south. Those that arise from south to north, that come back from north to south. There's people out there waiting to hear. Waiting to hear.
So they foretold World War I, World War II, attempts to establish peace on the West Coast and the East Coast. And they're Cherokee, and they're from Georgia. And any thoughts?
Do all these different tribes now, do they live on reservations, or are they assimilated?
Both. Yeah, well, that's one thing I was talking, again, before the class started. The same person who started the Lakota universities to teach the culture and the language to the Lakota also started a thing called Lakota finishing schools, because Native American culture is so different than white American culture that when Lakota kids go to college, they usually don't last more than a month before they come back, because the culture is so different. A couple of examples is Lakota culture is a warrior culture. So the distances between people is a lot greater than our culture. So if someone, I went to a Native American club meeting at at Southern Illinois University at the Student Center, and there was a new girl there from the reservation in South Dakota, Lakota. And I was trying to talk with her and found myself literally backing her around a pillar. And I
You want a distance between you.
finally realized what was going on, and I stopped. And she could pick the distance then, and then we could talk. Because Lakota culture is farther away. It's not unusual for when a Lakota man goes away, a son goes away, when he returns, his mother wants to hug him, but the culture will not allow her to hug him because that's not done in warrior culture. So the distances of eye contact, it is very challenging to make eye contact with someone. So when you're talking with someone, they'll be like this, or look down or look away, or just will not make eye contact with you, because in warrior culture, that's challenging. So to a white American, that means that they're not interested. It means that they're shifty, that they're devious. To their culture, it's just how people talk. So, yeah.
Well, this is an abstraction from sort of a police-oriented teaching course, but it's that one of the supposedly Spanish or Mexican, Hispanic from Latin America, that they were more likely, if they were arrested or and the police officer asked about what was going on, that their tendency was to come toward to be able to do that. So how does that mix?
Just a different culture. Yeah.
I mean, so this civilization with the whites that had taken over sort of inculcated a 180-degree change?
But each tribe can have its own culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Lakota. Navajo might be different.
Okay, but you know,
Well,
I
in
never
each-
saw that in a sense, like in North Dakota where I grew up.
Yeah.
But certainly there has been problems, you know, where the boundary
Mhm.
is in how
Yeah.
people are trying to talk and make sure that in a psychology course that I took, that it was in med school, they were trying to do comparisons about what the distance was that would automatically be there, but obviously this was more
Yeah.
white interference, and
Right.
women were more distant than men would be.
Yes.
But if you didn't look at that, then very little conversation was ever going to happen.
Mhm.
You know, and so it was, I don't know if that's because, as you say, they were a warring type of thing, and so what was supposed to be.
Well, I think each culture is different. So, you know, Africa, it'll be one thing. Asia, it'll be a different. Native American, it's different. The Lakota finishing school that I mentioned, they actually had to teach the kids, oh, you don't ever shake hands, you never touch. So you keep your distance, you don't shake hands, you don't make eye contact. You know, how does that translate to how you function? You know, make some disinterested, not trustworthy, shifty. So they had to actually teach them how to shake hands. You never give a firm handshake. It's always, you know, a wet fish because you don't want a challenge. So they had to teach them how to shake hands, different distances, how to talk to someone and make eye contact. Because, as I said, the students would go off to school, come back in less than a month because they just couldn't take it. So, you know, in Asia or Japan or China, if you don't bow, you know, heaven help you. Or, you know.
And the Hispanics, well, they want to be up close.
Of course, yes. So, yeah, hot-blooded, emotional.
Yeah.
It's just cultural differences. They're not one is right. They're just different.
How is the concept of your word then? Is that pretty much the same for all religions? In other words, before there was written text, and so contracts, or however you want to call that, were made by the spoken word. So just because they didn't put eye contact to that wouldn't mean, how was that different?
Well, the theory, I think, is honesty and integrity, but oftentimes the actual practical application is, if you're talking to someone of the dominant culture, you will say yes to anything they say, just to get rid of them. And then, I guess black culture in the 1860s or whatever, you never said no. You said no, you get beat, or worse, or sold, or killed. So I think there's the ideal, and there's the practical. So, and part of interacting with different cultures is to be aware of these things and to recognize what's going on. Trying to talk to a person and realize that you're backing them around a pillar, and to stop. Let them pick the distance. And even at that, it was difficult to speak because Lakota women don't speak to men that much. So, Middle Eastern culture with women,